You're right. I need to avoid all the names on the prohibited list, including Penny and Fiona. Let me write the first 3 chapters with appropriate names that aren't on the forbidden list. 7-year-old Annie clutched her mother's hand, wide eyes scanning the glittering chandeliers of San Francisco's most prestigious hotel ballroom. Her small body was partially hidden behind her mother's crisp black and white uniform, a stark contrast to the diamond-draped guests mingling around them. Bridget hadn't planned on bringing her daughter to work, but with only $24 to her name until payday, and her babysitter canceling last minute, she had no choice. The single mother whispered urgent instructions as she straightened her server's bow tie, praying her strict supervisor wouldn't notice the child. "Stay behind this curtain, sweetheart. Don't talk to anyone, and I'll check on you between serving rounds," Bridget said, tucking Annie into a small alcove hidden by thick velvet drapes. She handed her daughter a worn notebook and colored pencils from her bag. What none of the glittering elite knew was that the small girl with copper-colored braids possessed an extraordinary gift, the ability to understand any language after hearing it just once. This talent had manifested when she was barely 4, leaving doctors baffled and her mother both amazed and protective. Annie settled into her hiding spot, small fingers tracing patterns on the notebook as she watched the party through a narrow gap in the curtains. Her extraordinary hearing picked up fragments of a dozen languages: Spanish, French, German, each one as clear to her as her native English. Across the ballroom, a man commanded attention without speaking a word, his custom-tailored suit and imposing presence causing even the wealthiest guests to step aside as he passed. At 30 years old, Ryder was already a legend in certain circles of San Francisco, though few knew his true business. His dark eyes scanned the room methodically, noting exits, security positions, and potential threats, a habit ingrained from years operating in shadows where trust was currency and weakness was fatal. Tonight's charity gala was merely a convenient cover for more important matters. 4 Japanese men in immaculate suits entered the ballroom, their polite smiles masking calculating eyes as they approached various influential guests. Their presence at the gala raised no suspicions among the socialites, but Annie's gift allowed her to detect something others couldn't. While pretending to draw, the little girl noticed how the Japanese men never spoke to each other in English, switching to their native tongue whenever servers or guests moved away. Their lips formed words about target, opportunity, and revenge, concepts no 7-year-old should understand. Bridget worked efficiently, balancing silver trays of champagne flutes, while keeping anxious eyes on the curtained alcove hiding her daughter. Each tip earned was mentally allocated to next month's rent, the overdue electric bill, or Annie's school supplies for the coming term. The Mafia boss made his way toward a reserved table, nodding curtly to associates while maintaining the careful facade of legitimate businessman. Tonight was supposed to be straightforward, a public appearance to reinforce his organization's respectable ventures, nothing more. Annie's small fingers gripped her pencil tighter as she watched the Japanese men split up, strategically positioning themselves around the room in what appeared random, but felt deliberate to her observant eyes. Their lips continued moving in rapid conversation despite their physical separation. "The glass by his plate. Make sure it's the one with the special vintage," one man mouthed in Japanese to another across the room, unaware that a child hidden behind curtains could decipher every word. Annie's heart began racing as she understood the sinister plan unfolding. Bridget approached the VIP table with practiced grace, unaware that her daughter was witnessing a murder plot, or that the intended target was the intimidating man now taking his seat. The little girl's hands trembled as she watched her mother preparing to serve the very table in danger. Annie slipped from her hiding place, small body weaving between elegant gowns and suited legs, as panic propelled her forward. She had to reach her mother before the special drink was served, before the Japanese men completed their deadly plan against the man who, unknown to them all, would soon change their lives forever. The crystal chandeliers cast prismatic patterns across the ballroom as Annie pushed through the forest of adult legs, her small heart hammering against her ribs. Ahead, her mother was arranging elaborate place settings at the VIP table, where Ryder had just seated himself, unaware of the danger. One of the Japanese men approached the head server, gesturing toward a specific bottle of sake he'd generously brought as a gift for the distinguished guests. His smile never reached his cold eyes, as he insisted this particular bottle be served to the table immediately. Annie's copper braids flew behind her as she rushed forward, her extraordinary hearing picking up fragments of the assassin's continued communications. "Once he drinks, we have 20 minutes before symptoms begin," one mouthed to another, who nodded almost imperceptibly from across the room. Bridget's eyes widened in horror as she spotted her daughter racing across the ballroom floor, breaking their careful agreement to remain hidden. The momentary distraction caused her to nearly drop an expensive bottle of champagne, earning a sharp look from her supervisor. Ryder noticed the commotion, his predator's instincts instantly alert to any disruption in his environment. His dark gaze tracked the small child weaving determinedly through the crowd, reading urgency in her movements that others might dismiss as childish impulsiveness. The head server approached with the special sack bottle, professionally describing its alleged rarity and quality as he began pouring into Ryder's designated glass. The liquid caught the light like liquid platinum, beautiful and deadly in its crystal prison. Annie reached her mother's side just as Bridget set down an elaborate plate of seared scallops before Ryder, their eyes meeting in a moment of silent communication that spoke volumes about consequences to come later. Neither noticed how the Mafia boss studied them both with curious intensity. The little girl's hand shot out without warning, deliberately knocking the poisoned glass away from Ryder's place setting with such force that it shattered against the marble floor. The crystalline sound silenced nearby conversations as all eyes turned toward the dramatic interruption. "I'm so sorry, sir." "My daughter shouldn't be here," Bridget gasped, mortification coloring her cheeks as she grabbed Annie's shoulders, already calculating how many months of tips this mistake would cost. "She doesn't understand what she's done." Ryder's expression remained unreadable, as champagne seeped into the expensive Italian leather of his shoes, though the muscle in his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The 4 Japanese men exchanged subtle glances, their carefully orchestrated plan dissolving before their eyes. "They put something bad in your drink," Annie whispered, her voice barely audible above the resumed chatter of the gala. The men with the fake smiles. "They said in Japanese that it would make you sick in 20 minutes. Bridget's face paled at her daughter's words, torn between dismissing them as childish imagination and the disturbing precision of the accusation. "Annie, that's enough," she hissed, already steering the child away from the table, away from the man whose dark eyes had suddenly sharpened with interest. With a subtle gesture that most would miss, Ryder signaled to his security personnel stationed discreetly around the perimeter of the ballroom. 2 men immediately moved toward the Japanese businessman, while another approached the head server to secure the sake bottle for testing. "Wait," Ryder commanded, his voice cutting through Bridget's hasty retreat like a blade. "How does your daughter understand Japanese?" The question hung in the air between them, laden with implications that sent chills down the waitress's spine. Annie looked up at the Mafia boss without fear, her unusual perception recognizing something familiar in his wariness. "I understand all languages after I hear them once," she stated simply, as though discussing the weather rather than an impossible ability. Seconds stretched into an eternity as Ryder studied the small girl who had potentially saved his life, weighing the truth of her improbable claim against his decades of experience with liars and manipulators. Something in her clear, direct gaze prompted him to make a decision. "Your daughter will stay with me while we sort this out," he stated, not a request, but a command directed at Bridget, whose protective instincts flared immediately. "My men will escort you both to a private room upstairs after your shift ends." Bridget's supervisor appeared beside them, face flushed with anger at the disruption. "I apologize profusely for this incident, Mr. Burke," he began, shooting daggers at Bridget with his eyes. "This server will be terminated immediately, and compensation for your suit will be arranged." "That won't be necessary," Ryder replied coolly, straightening his cuffs with deliberate precision. "In fact, this woman and her daughter will be my personal guests for the remainder of the evening. You may direct any complaints to my office tomorrow." Across the ballroom, security personnel discreetly cornered the 4 Japanese men, conducting searches that revealed concealed weapons and communication devices. Their expressions remained impassive, even as they were escorted from the premises, through service exits to avoid creating a scene. Annie watched the proceedings with unsettling calmness, her young mind processing complex adult situations through the lens of her extraordinary abilities. She tugged on her mother's sleeve, whispering urgently about the other men still in the room who were connected to the plot. 3 more by the eastern exit and 2 near the kitchens, she murmured, her eyes tracking movements invisible to others. "They're waiting to see if the first plan works before trying something else. They keep saying the name Tanaka over and over." Ryder's expression betrayed nothing, but his hand moved subtly to his jacket pocket, removing a phone and sending a text without looking at the screen. Within moments, additional security materialized near the locations Annie had identified, their movements casual, yet purposeful. The orchestra transitioned to a new piece, the melodic strains of violins creating a soundtrack for the deadly chess match unfolding beneath the social veneer. Bridget stood frozen between worlds, her precarious existence as a struggling single mother and the dangerous orbit of the man before her. "Your shift ends in 30 minutes, Ryder stated, checking an expensive watch with calculated nonchalance. "Until then, continue as normal to avoid drawing attention. My men will watch your daughter." His tone left no room for negotiation, despite the polite phrasing. Annie squeezed her mother's hand reassuringly, her wisdom beyond her years evident in the gentle pressure. "It's okay, Mom. He doesn't want to hurt us. He's curious about me because people don't usually surprise him." The insight was so precise that Ryder's eyebrow raised slightly. Bridget hesitated, maternal instincts warring with the reality of their situation, and the strange confidence her daughter exhibited. "If anything happens to her," she began, her voice low and fierce, despite their disparity in power and status, "then you would be justified in any response," Ryder finished for her, respect flickering briefly across his features at her courage. "But nothing will happen. You have my word." The promise carried weight beyond their brief acquaintance, something ancient and binding in its delivery. Annie settled into a chair beside the powerful man, as her mother reluctantly returned to her duties, the little girl's posture mimicking his with unconscious precision. "They planned to blame your death on heart failure," she informed him casually, reaching for a breadstick with childlike practicality. Ryder's lips quirked in what might have been amusement on another man's face. "And how many languages do you speak exactly?" he inquired, signaling a security guard to bring the child a proper plate of food as they waited. The penthouse suite's panoramic windows revealed San Francisco's glittering skyline as Ryder's security team escorted Bridget and Annie through the private elevator. Plush carpets muffled their footsteps, while priceless art adorned walls that had witnessed countless dangerous negotiations. "The poison was confirmed in the sake," announced a stern-faced man in a tailored suit, placing a tablet before Ryder showing chemical analysis results. Untraceable in normal circumstances, lethal within hours, but mimicking natural heart failure, signature method of the Tanaka Syndicate. Annie curled into the massive leather sofa, her small frame dwarfed by furniture designed for power meetings, her exceptional mind processing the adult's conversation with unsettling clarity. She sketched rapidly in her notebook, recreating faces of men she'd observed throughout the evening with photographic precision. Bridget stood rigidly by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her server's uniform incongruous against the luxury surrounding them, her thoughts racing between gratitude for her daughter's gift and terror at their current situation. The boundaries of her carefully constructed life had shattered in a single evening. "Your daughter's ability is extraordinary," Ryder stated, studying Annie with calculating interest as she continued sketching the faces of conspirators who hadn't been captured. "How long has she been able to understand languages instantly?" "Since she was 4, Bridget replied cautiously, moving protectively toward her daughter. "A neurologist called it hyperpolyglottism, but couldn't explain how she learns complete languages after hearing just a few sentences or reading lips from across a room." The Mafia boss nodded thoughtfully, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, as he processed this information with the same precision he applied to business acquisitions and territory disputes. Annie's gift represented both opportunity and liability in his world of shadows and secrets. "Tanaka has been trying to eliminate me for months," he explained, pouring amber liquid into crystal glasses and offering one to Bridget, who declined with a small shake of her head. Their previous attempts were sophisticated but detectable. Tonight's approach was nearly perfect. Annie looked up from her sketching, her copper braids falling across her shoulder as she studied the powerful man saved by her intervention. "They'll try again," she stated with childlike directness, pointing to her detailed drawings. "These 3 men escaped. I heard them planning a backup method." Ryder's security team mobilized instantly at this revelation, comparing Annie's sketches to surveillance footage and dispatching additional personnel to secure the building's perimeter. Their synchronized efficiency spoke volumes about the organization behind their measured movements. "You and your daughter need protection now," Ryder declared, his tone leaving no room for argument as he crossed to a sophisticated communications console embedded in what appeared to be an ordinary bookshelf. "Tanaka doesn't leave witnesses to failed assassinations." Bridget's face paled as the implications crashed over her, their modest apartment, her job, Annie's school, all compromised by one act of intervention. "We have nowhere to go," she whispered, years of stubborn self-reliance crumbling under this new, unfamiliar threat. The security chief entered with updated intelligence, his voice low and urgent as he reported movement near Bridget's apartment building across town. They've already found her address through the catering company's employee records. A team is stationed there now, waiting. You'll stay here tonight, Ryder decided, activating advanced security protocols with a fingerprint scan that transformed the luxurious penthouse into an impenetrable fortress. Tomorrow we'll establish more permanent arrangements until the threat is neutralized. Annie approached the wall of monitors displaying security feeds from throughout the building, her extraordinary perception catching details adults might miss. The man in the delivery uniform isn't really delivering anything, she observed, pointing to a seemingly innocuous figure in the lobby below. Dawn broke over San Francisco as Bridget awoke in an unfamiliar bedroom larger than her entire apartment, momentary disorientation giving way to the crushing reality of their situation. Silk sheets rustled beneath her as she rose quickly to check on Annie in the adjoining room. Her daughter sat cross-legged on a window seat overlooking the bay, already deep in conversation with Ryder, who listened with uncharacteristic patience as she explained how different languages created distinct patterns in her mind. The fearsome crime boss seemed genuinely fascinated by the child's unique perspective. "Mom, Mr. Burke has books in 17 languages," Annie exclaimed, eyes bright with excitement despite the dangerous circumstances that had brought them to this opulent prison. "He's letting me read them all, and his chef is making chocolate chip pancakes." Ryder turned toward Bridget, his expression inscrutable as he assessed her rumpled appearance and wary stance. "Your daughter has exceptional observational skills beyond her language abilities," he stated, placing a tablet on the marble countertop. She identified 3 more Tanaka operatives from security footage overnight. Bridget approached cautiously, years of struggling alone making trust impossible, especially with a man whose reputation preceded him in whispered warnings throughout the city. "What happens to us now?" she asked directly, chin lifted in defiance of their power imbalance. "My security team eliminated the immediate threat at your apartment," Ryder explained with clinical detachment, as if discussing ordinary business matters rather than lethal operations. "Your belongings are being relocated to a safe house where you'll stay temporarily." Annie looked up from her book, her young face solemn beyond her years. "The bad men won't stop coming," she stated with absolute certainty, her gift for languages apparently extending to reading between lines of adult conversations. "They think we know too much now." Bridget's hands trembled slightly as she accepted coffee from a staff member who materialized silently with breakfast. "I can't just disappear from my life. I have bills, responsibilities, Annie's school." Her voice trailed off as the magnitude of their predicament settled over her. "Your financial obligations have been addressed," Ryder replied matter-of-factly, sliding a folder toward her containing documents that made her eyes widen in disbelief. "Consider it payment for services rendered. Your daughter saved my life, a debt I take seriously." A security alert interrupted their conversation, screens throughout the penthouse displaying footage of police officers in the lobby, requesting access to Ryder's floor. Their unexpected appearance sent his security team into controlled chaos, positions shifting to protect their principal. "They're not really police," Annie whispered, studying their lip movements on the security feed with narrowed eyes. "The tall one just told the others in Japanese to remember the extraction plan if they find us upstairs." Ryder's expression hardened as he activated a hidden compartment in the wall revealing an arsenal of weapons. "The Tanaka organization has infiltrated local law enforcement," he explained, selecting a handgun with practiced efficiency. "We need to move immediately." Bridget pulled Annie close, maternal instinct overwhelming everything else as armed men prepared for battle around them. "I don't understand any of this. Why would such powerful people care about a waitress and her daughter?" she demanded, fear sharpening her words. "Because your daughter's ability makes her invaluable," Ryder answered with brutal honesty, leading them toward what appeared to be a solid wall that slid open to reveal a hidden elevator. "She can understand conversations no one else can access. In my world, that's worth killing for." Annie clutched her mother's hand as they entered the concealed escape route, her extraordinary mind already cataloging details for future reference. "Mr. Burke has secrets too," she whispered, just loudly enough for the man himself to hear. "I saw him reading a file with your name on it before you woke up." The safe house nestled in Sausalito's exclusive hills bore no resemblance to Bridget's modest apartment, its Mediterranean architecture and manicured grounds designed to blend among the neighborhood's wealthy residents. Armed guards maintained a discreet presence while appearing to be ordinary maintenance staff. "You've been watching us for years," Bridget accused Ryder, as they stood in the luxurious kitchen, her discovery of surveillance photos in his files shattering any illusion that their meeting had been coincidental. Why would someone like you track a waitress and her daughter? Ryder's customary mask of control slipped momentarily, revealing something almost like regret in his dark eyes. Your husband didn't die in a random accident 5 years ago, he admitted, maintaining careful distance from her as if anticipating her reaction. He was one of my accountants. Bridget's world tilted on its axis. Memories of her loving husband, a quiet financial analyst who died when Annie was barely 2, colliding violently with this revelation. That's impossible, she whispered, gripping the marble countertop to steady herself. Scott worked for an investment firm downtown. A legitimate front for certain aspects of my organization, Ryder clarified, watching her process this devastating truth with clinical detachment. He was extraordinarily talented at managing complex financial structures between my legitimate and shadow operations. Annie appeared in the doorway, her intuitive understanding of adult tensions drawing her to her mother's side like a protective shadow. Is that why I can do what I do? She asked with unsettling directness, connecting dots that should have remained beyond a child's comprehension. Ryder nodded slowly, his respect for the child's perception evident in his unfiltered response. Your father possessed a similar gift, not with languages but with numbers and patterns. His mind processed financial data in ways that made him invaluable to my organization and dangerous to my competitors. So, my husband was a criminal, Bridget stated flatly, years of struggling alone after Scott's death now colored by this betrayal from beyond the grave. And you let me believe he was just an ordinary man who died in a car accident. He wanted you protected from this world, Ryder countered, sliding an envelope across the counter containing photographs of Scott with a much younger Ryder. When Tanaka's organization targeted him, he made me promise to keep you both at a distance, financially supported but uninvolved. Bridget's fingers trembled as she examined evidence of her husband's secret life, recognizing locations and dates that corresponded with business trips she'd never questioned. Those monthly deposits into Annie's college fund, those were from you, weren't they? Part of our agreement, Ryder confirmed, his usual intimidating presence softened by what appeared to be genuine loyalty to his former employee. Scott saved my life once, much as your daughter did yesterday. In my world, such debts are binding beyond death. Annie studied the photographs with unusual intensity, her gift apparently extending to reading emotions hidden in facial expressions. Daddy trusted him, Mom, she stated simply, pointing to a particular image where the men stood shoulder to shoulder at what appeared to be a charity event. Bridget sank onto a kitchen stool, her worldview realigning with painful clarity as pieces fell into place. The anonymous benefactor who paid medical bills when Annie was hospitalized with pneumonia, the mysterious scholarship offers, the landlord who never raised their rent despite skyrocketing prices throughout the city. I've respected Scott's wishes to keep you at arm's length until now, Ryder concluded, his tone shifting to one of strategic assessment rather than emotional confession. But Annie's intervention yesterday and her extraordinary abilities have made invisibility impossible. Tanaka won't stop hunting her. Night fell over the Sausalito safe house as Bridget paced before the fireplace, processing revelations about her late husband, while formulating plans to protect Annie from threats she'd never imagined. The comfortable prison of luxury couldn't mask the danger lurking beyond its secure perimeter. Tanaka's organization has gone unusually quiet, reported Preston, Ryder's head of security, displaying satellite imagery of known Yakuza properties throughout the Bay Area. Their standard protocol involves regrouping after failed operations, but intelligence suggests they're preparing something significant. Annie sat cross-legged on the plush carpet, surrounded by books in various languages, as she absorbed vocabulary and grammar at an astonishing rate. Her copper braids had been replaced by a short pixie cut, part of their disguise protocol, making her appear older and less recognizable. Ryder entered from his makeshift command center in the adjacent room, his usual impeccable appearance showing subtle signs of strain after 36 hours of continuous strategic planning. The dangerous chess match unfolding required his complete focus and considerable resources. They've located Scott's research files, he announced without preamble, placing a laptop before Bridget showing surveillance photos of men ransacking a storage facility. Files I didn't know existed until my team intercepted communications between Tanaka's lieutenants discussing their contents. Bridget's fingers trembled slightly as she examined the images, recognizing items from their former home that she'd placed in storage after Scott's death, boxes of financial documents she'd never bothered to examine, assuming they contained ordinary tax records and work papers. What exactly was my husband researching? She demanded, maternal fear sharpening her tone as she glanced toward Annie. who continued reading with apparent casualness while clearly absorbing every word of the adult conversation. What could possibly justify putting our daughter in danger? Ryder hesitated, an unusual occurrence for a man accustomed to absolute command, before retrieving a secure tablet from his jacket. Scott was tracking money laundering operations across multiple criminal organizations, including evidence that could destroy the Tanaka Syndicate's political protection. Annie looked up from her book, her extraordinary perceptiveness evident in her solemn expression. "That's why Daddy's car crash wasn't really an accident," she stated with disturbing clarity, connecting dots that adults had tried to shield her from. "The bad men did it, just like they tried to hurt Mr. Burke." "Yes," Ryder confirmed, respecting the child enough to offer honesty rather than protective lies. "And now they believe his research contained information about their operations that could be used against them. Information they think you inherited somehow through your language abilities." Security alarms shattered the tense conversation. Screens throughout the house displaying perimeter breaches at multiple points as dark-clad figures moved with military precision across the property. The attack they'd been anticipating had arrived with overwhelming force. Preston deployed countermeasures with practiced efficiency, tactical teams moving into defensive positions while emergency protocols activated throughout the house. Steel shutters covering windows, reinforced doors sealing automatically, and hidden weapons caches becoming accessible. "The panic room now," Ryder commanded, his hand moving instinctively to the concealed weapon beneath his jacket, as security feeds showed multiple attackers breaching the outer defenses. "They've compromised someone on my team. These entry tactics match our own protocols too precisely." Bridget grabbed Annie's hand, maternal instinct overriding fear, as they followed Ryder through a hidden doorway disguised as a bookshelf, entering a fortified chamber equipped with independent power, air filtration, and communication systems. The heavy door sealed behind them with hydraulic precision. 27 attackers, Annie stated calmly, having counted each intruder on the security feeds before they entered the panic room. "The leader has a dragon tattoo on his neck and keeps giving orders in a Kansai dialect rather than standard Japanese." Ryder's expression shifted from surprise to tactical assessment at this detail, immediately contacting his remaining forces through encrypted channels. "Focus fire on the commander with neck tattoos. He's Tanaka's nephew, their most skilled tactical leader. His presence confirms this is their primary strike team." The security monitors showed Ryder's men engaging the attackers with professional precision, but they were clearly outnumbered by the Yakuza force. Gunfire echoed through the house's reinforced walls, muffled but unmistakable, as the battle intensified around their hidden sanctuary. "There's another way out," Ryder explained, activating a concealed panel revealing an underground tunnel. "This passage leads to a boathouse on the bay, a contingency I established in every property after your husband saved me from a similar ambush 7 years ago." Fog rolled across the bay as Ryder navigated the speedboat through darkness, the city's lights creating ghostly halos in the mist, while Bridget held Annie close beneath a thermal blanket. Their narrow escape through the tunnel had succeeded, but the night's dangers were far from over. "We're being followed," Annie whispered, her enhanced senses detecting the subtle change in engine noise behind them before either adult recognized the threat. "2 boats, coming fast from the East Channel. I can hear them coordinating in Japanese to cut us off near Alcatraz." Ryder altered course immediately, trusting the child's perception without question, as he pushed the boat to maximum speed toward a private marina on the opposite shore. The pursuing vessels emerged from the fog like predatory shadows, their powerful engines gaining ground with each passing moment. Bridget's arms tightened protectively around her daughter, as spray from the churning wake soaked through their clothes, the chill nothing compared to the ice in her veins at the realization that these men would never stop hunting them. The life she had carefully constructed was gone forever. "There's a final contingency location," Ryder shouted over the engine's roar, entering a narrow channel between abandoned piers where larger vessels couldn't follow. "A property not connected to any of my known holdings. Scott established it years ago as our ultimate fallback position." Gunfire erupted from the pursuing boats, bullets striking water around them as Tanaka's men closed the distance despite Ryder's evasive maneuvers. The fog provided partial cover, but wouldn't conceal them for long as dawn approached with its revealing light. Annie watched the shoreline with intense concentration, her gift for patterns allowing her to track their position despite the disorienting fog. "Take the next left channel," she instructed with surprising authority for a 7-year-old. "The warehouse with blue doors. I recognize it from Daddy's photos." Ryder complied without hesitation, steering sharply into a narrow passage between derelict industrial buildings, that hadn't seen legitimate business in decades. The concrete structure Annie indicated appeared abandoned, its weathered exterior concealing whatever secret Scott had established within. Their boat slipped into a partially submerged entrance beneath the warehouse, automatic doors sealing behind them as they entered a hidden dock illuminated by emergency lighting that activated with their arrival. The sophisticated facility belied its decrepit exterior, revealing Scott's meticulous planning. "He created all this?" Bridget whispered in disbelief as they disembarked into a fully equipped operations center built within the abandoned warehouse. "My husband, the quiet accountant who helped with Annie's math homework and grew orchids as a hobby?" Ryder's expression softened momentarily with something resembling respect as he surveyed the facility. "Scott was the most brilliant strategist I've ever known. His financial expertise was merely one aspect of a mind that could anticipate scenarios others couldn't imagine." The hidden facility contained a comprehensive database of Tanaka's operations worldwide, including blackmail material on high-ranking government officials who provided protection to their criminal enterprises. Scott had methodically gathered this intelligence through a network of informants who believed they were working for Ryder's organization rather than against Tanaka. Annie discovered a sealed envelope addressed to her in her father's handwriting, containing a coded message that only someone with her linguistic abilities could decipher. The intricate puzzle combined elements of 5 different languages, creating a virtual key that unlocked the final piece of Scott's elaborate contingency plan. Bridget watched her daughter work through her husband's final communication with a mixture of pride and heartbreak, recognizing patterns in Annie's analytical approach that mirrored Scott's so precisely it took her breath away. The genetic legacy of his brilliance lived on in their daughter, though in a different form that even he couldn't have fully anticipated. Security monitors throughout the facility displayed their pursuers searching the waterfront, growing increasingly frustrated as their quarry seemingly vanished into the fog. Their tactical discipline began fraying as the Yakuza commander demanded results his team couldn't deliver. "They'll find us eventually," Annie stated, with the matter-of-fact clarity that made her observations so unsettling. "The man with the dragon tattoo keeps saying they have someone inside the police department scanning security cameras throughout the waterfront district." Bridget stood straighter, years of protective motherhood crystallizing into determination, as she faced Ryder directly. "No more running," she declared, her exhaustion evident, but overshadowed by newfound resolve. "My husband spent years gathering evidence against these people. It's time we used it." Ryder nodded in agreement, accessing a sophisticated computer system that responded to his biometric scan. Scott left a complete intelligence package designed to dismantle the Tanaka organization. Financial records, blackmail material, evidence of assassinations including his own murder. The warehouse's communication system alerted them to approaching vessels, not the sleek speedboats of their Yakuza pursuers, but heavy law enforcement craft, moving with deliberate purpose toward their location. The tactical situation had shifted in ways none of them had anticipated. "FBI Counter-Organized Crime Division," Annie identified, watching the approaching boats on security feeds with her extraordinary perception. "The lead agent is speaking English with a Boston accent, giving orders to arrest everyone, including us. They think you're working with Tanaka, Mr. Burke." Ryder's expression hardened as he made a swift calculation. Decades of operating in shadows, making any interaction with federal authorities deeply problematic for his organization. The approaching forces represented a different kind of threat than the Yakuza assassins, but potentially just as dangerous. Dawn broke over San Francisco Bay, golden light piercing the fog as 3 unlikely allies stood surrounded by federal agents in tactical gear, their weapons trained on Ryder, while evidence bags filled with Scott's meticulously gathered intelligence were loaded into government vehicles. "Your husband created a dead man switch," Ryder explained quietly to Bridget, as agents maintained a cautious perimeter around them. "If he didn't enter a specific code every month, all his evidence would automatically transfer to federal authorities. I received notification when you activated this facility." Special Agent Harlow approached with professional caution, her skepticism evident as she studied the notorious crime boss standing protectively near a waitress and child. "Mr. Burke, you're a person of significant interest in multiple ongoing investigations," she stated, handcuffs ready but not yet employed. "And I've just delivered the entire Tanaka syndicate to you," Ryder countered smoothly, gesturing toward the evidence being processed by the federal team, including proof of their infiltration of local law enforcement and the assassination of a federal informant 5 years ago. Annie stepped forward with surprising confidence, addressing the lead agent directly while maintaining perfect eye contact. "The men who tried to kill us are still searching the waterfront. she informed them, pointing north toward the abandoned piers. They have 7 boats and 32 men total. The federal raid on Tanaka's forces resulted in a firefight that illuminated the morning fog with muzzle flashes, tactical teams converging from both water and air in a coordinated strike that demonstrated why the FBI's organized crime division was feared even by the most disciplined criminal organizations. Their precise execution suggested they'd been tracking the Yakuza cell for months, waiting for exactly this opportunity. Satellite imagery displayed on command center screens showed simultaneous raids occurring at 12 locations across 3 countries, Scott's intelligence package triggering an international law enforcement response that had been years in preparation. The Deadman Switch had activated a carefully orchestrated dismantling of Tanaka's entire power structure, not just their San Francisco operations. Agent Harlow's professional demeanor cracked slightly at the child's detailed assessment, especially when tactical drones confirmed the presence of armed suspects exactly where Annie had indicated. The federal team immediately dispatched response units to the locations with renewed urgency. "Your husband was working with us," Harlow revealed to Bridget, compassion softening her official tone. "His cover was so deep that even our direct handlers didn't know his full operation. This evidence, he gathered, will dismantle 3 major criminal organizations beyond just the Tanaka Syndicate." Bridget struggled to reconcile this final revelation with the man she thought she'd known, the loving father who read bedtime stories and surprised her with wildflowers, somehow simultaneously being a criminal accountant, federal informant, and strategic mastermind planning years beyond his own death. "What happens to them now?" Ryder asked, nodding toward Bridget and Annie with uncharacteristic concern evident in his usually guarded expression. "Scott's operation has made them targets for multiple organizations beyond just Tanaka. They need ongoing protection." Harlow hesitated, agency protocols conflicting with the unusual circumstances before them. "Witness protection is standard procedure, but this case has complications given their connection to you and the child's unique abilities, which make traditional identity concealment problematic." Annie tugged at her mother's sleeve, whispering observations about the agents surrounding them. Which ones were nervous? Which were secretly recording? Which had already decided Ryder's fate regardless of his cooperation? Her gift continued providing insights that others couldn't access. "I have a proposal," Ryder stated, his tactical mind formulating a solution that served multiple interests simultaneously. "My testimony and cooperation regarding specific organized crime operations in exchange for immunity for minor offenses and specialized protection for Bridget and Annie." The federal negotiation team arrived via helicopter. Senior Justice Department officials, recognizing the extraordinary opportunity presented by having a major crime figure willing to provide actionable intelligence against international syndicates. The chess game had entered its final phase. Hours later, as sunset painted the bay in brilliant orange, Bridget stood on the balcony of a secure federal building, watching helicopters return from the massive operation that had resulted in the arrest of every Tanaka operative in the Bay Area. The nightmare was ending, but questions about their future remained. "Mom, Mr. Burke is going away for a while," Annie stated, having overheard negotiations through walls that adults assumed were soundproof. "But he made them promise we'll be safe, and he's going to help the government people catch all the bad men who worked with Daddy." Bridget knelt before her extraordinary daughter, finally understanding that Annie's gift wasn't just about languages, but about perceiving the truth in all its forms, a legacy from her father more valuable than any inheritance. "How do you feel about moving somewhere new, starting fresh?" "As long as we're together, it doesn't matter where we go," Annie replied with wisdom beyond her years, her copper eyes reflecting the setting sun as she glanced toward the conference room where Ryder continued negotiating terms with federal authorities, securing their future while redefining his own. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, please write in the comments which place you're watching this story from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, because your support is important for me to continue here.